Hi guys, this is Billy from AdultCello.com, and today we're going to continue our discussion of how to build your ideal practice routine. In the last video, we talked about when, where, and how long you should practice every day, and today I want to dive in and look at practice on a micro scale for a little bit. We'll take a passage from an etude designed for an early intermediate student, and I'll demonstrate how I would go about learning it as efficiently as possible. The faster we can progress and see returns on our investment of practice time, the more motivated we will be to continue our cello journeys. This is probably one of the most important video series I could possibly come out with because, in my experience, even if you have a private teacher and take weekly lessons, how to practice often does not get enough attention. We learn what we need to work on and we get new assignments, but learning how to learn effectively often isn't covered clearly enough, and this is like planting seedlings without the compost. The ability to even think about this topic is our advantage over kids. As adults, we're better able to see the big picture and to eat our vegetables in the moment. This is that case where you can either have one cookie instantly or you can resist and exert some patience knowing that you will get 3 cookies in the near future. So, before we dive into the piece, I want to clear something up that I think is truly important. I often mention the term efficiency with regard to adult learners because, unlike kids, we don't have all day long to practice. In my opinion, however, and especially for those of you earlier on in your journeys, efficiency does not mean killing 2 birds with 1 stone or multitasking like it might in other areas of life. To me, efficiency is the rate at which we are able to learn. And in my opinion, the reason why cello is so difficult is that we have so many seemingly unconnected tasks going on at the same time. Left hand playing notes with the fingers, bow hand giving life to the sound on a completely different plane of existence, our ears tasked with making sure we're playing in tune, our inner ears ideally hearing the next pitch before we even play it, and our musical mind keeping an overarching sense of how the note we are playing fits into the larger phrase. That is a lot to manage, and that's why I believe a lot of our learning is inefficient. We end up trying to practice many of these tasks simultaneously before we even have a strong grasp of them individually. So for me on the cello, efficiency is actually all about deconstructing a piece into its separate elements and then piecing the whole back together after the individual tasks are comfortable. Okay, yes, in the beginning, our efficient practice will probably seem like it's taking longer to learn pieces than by doing it less strictly. But the difference is that the rate at which you learn aspects like bow control and left-hand fingerboard geography will skyrocket. And the great thing about cello is that this means a faster rate of learning in the long run, even when the music gets much, much harder. Not to mention less time spent trying passages over and over and over, just waiting for a miracle to happen so that you can suddenly play it comfortably. So let's look at a piece of music and I'll show you how I would approach working on it. This is Etude number 9 from Dotzauer's 113 Studies, Book 1. So step 1, first thing I do is look at it without the cello, and what I'm looking for are the general characteristics of the piece. What key is it in? What's the time signature? Are there any tricky or unusual rhythms I can see? Unusual bowing patterns, unusual note patterns, etc. So the etude I picked for the sake of this video is relatively straightforward. There's no key signature, which means it's either essentially in C major or A minor. It's in common time, which means 4 quarter note beats per bar, and with the exception of 2 bars, the entire piece is continuous eighth notes with slurs connecting every 4 eighth notes. These are all helpful things to notice ahead of time because now I will have a general idea of the scales I will probably need to utilize. And now I also know my goal will be slurring 4 notes per bow and creating a coherent musical line that way. Great. Step 2 is to pizzicato the notes. I want to be able to pizzicato my way through the entire piece, making sure that I'm playing the notes in tune and in rhythm. And I don't want to feel like there are any hiccups in my playing. If a certain section or left-hand shift is tripping me up, I want to work on it until it's smooth as butter. Ideally, you want to get to the point where it is so secure that continuing to play it only pizzicato would essentially feel like a waste of time. So, left hand squared away, let's add the bow. Step 3 would be playing the notes 1 note per bow. I would start with full bows, focusing on creating a beautiful sound and a fluid bow arm. Again, no strange hiccups whenever a harder section presents itself. Then maybe another pass with shorter bow strokes at a faster tempo. For this piece, I think step 4 is slurring 2 notes together. This is a nice stepping stone to the final product of 4 notes slurred. My focus here is maintaining a fluid sound with nice long bows at a slower speed, taking extra care not to have a huge break in sound at each bow change. I might use the image of a super long, thin snake. You want to trace the unbroken outline of this sinuous creature. Then try with shorter bows at a faster tempo. And so by step 5, we are finally ready to play the notes with the correct bowing, 4 notes to a bow. Okay, you may be wondering about the question of dynamics and other markings in the score that describe how to play the piece, such as crescendo, diminuendo, etc. In my opinion, I think for those of us earlier on in our journeys, adding dynamics or other expressive elements would essentially be step 6. Later on down the road, I would include dynamics into my practice process because the nuance required in the bow should be built in as early as possible. But for my adult students early on in their journeys, I stress learning how to make a beautiful open sound throughout the entire piece. If you can do that, I believe it's easier then to adjust your bowing to create dynamics. For me, beauty of sound needs to be instilled from the start. This process, with a focus on creating a beautiful sound throughout, is actually the exact process I use and teach in my course, Cello in 30 Days, the Ultimate Beginner Course. The 30 daily sequential lessons in the course allow me to work with you and essentially to teach you how to practice and how to approach learning on the cello. If you're interested in seeing and learning more about it, there's a link below in the comments section. So this is basically the skeleton of what I would consider an efficient approach to practicing the cello. When I started, before I knew better, my practicing was essentially one step. Try playing the piece over and over in fits and starts. Eventually, I realized that by deconstructing the piece into smaller bite-sized tasks and then reassembling those tasks slowly, I ended up way further down the road. I hope that helps, and please keep in mind that while I believe in deconstructing your playing into smaller, manageable tasks, the tasks themselves will change slightly depending on the piece you're learning and what it calls for from the player. Stay tuned for next week as we take a look at creating your ideal practice routine now on a macro level. And if you like this video, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. Thanks so much.